But how do you see the way that like social media is affecting like the younger people of today compared to like how it was maybe when we were growing up with it?
That was such an old person question that I'm going to reframe for you. How is social media affecting people today?
Welcome to City Square Podcast, where we talk with everyday people about faith and work. My name is John, and if this is your first time tuning in, please take a quick moment to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Like the video, click the bell, and throughout the conversation, feel free to leave any questions or comments that you might have. And for this episode, we have two guests, and today I'm with Kyle Crim and Lee Wright, both college directors at different universities. How are you guys doing?
Doing good.
Good, man. Great to see your face.
It's even better to see y'all's faces. If y'all wouldn't mind taking a moment, and y'all have both been on before, but just take a moment and just give a quick blurb about who you are.
For sure. Yeah, I have been on before. I'm very well known as the first ever guest on City Square Podcast, so there's that. But other than that, my claim to fame, I guess, I'm a college minister in West-ish, Texas, in San Angelo, Texas, Angelo State University, finishing up my first year as the director at this Baptist student ministry, but altogether I've been in college ministry for about 6 years.
Cool. Awesome. And I'm Lee Wright. I'm the RUF campus minister at UTSA, University of Texas at San Antonio, if you're tuning in from somewhere like Minnesota. I've just started my 10th year of doing RUF, which is pretty amazing. So I was the RUF campus minister in Orlando for 6 years, and we moved here in 2020 to kind of restart the ministry at UTSA. Married, I have 3 kids. I'm a coach as well, which is really fun. I'm really fond of Big Bend as well. I'm actually wearing a Big Bend hat for those who are tuning in on YouTube. So John and I talk a lot about Big Bend and the beauty of the high desert. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
So, yeah, that's me.
Schwallen Desert, man. So I just kind of realized I kind of forgot something, but it's all good. So Kyle, you're finishing your first year as director at Angelo State, but your first gig as a director was at Sul Ross, just north of Big Bend, in 2020.
Yeah, that's why I said I now live in West-ish, right, Texas.
West-ish, yeah.
Because this isn't West Texas. It used to be known as West Texas in my eyes.
It is kind of awkward whenever anybody calls San Angelo West Texas.
Yeah,
my instinct reaction is to correct them, but sometimes I let it slide, sometimes I don't. It just depends on if I feel like getting in a fight that day.
Exactly.
And so your first gig doing college ministry was in 2020 at Sul Ross, and Lee, you had moved to San Antonio in 2020 to be the director of RUF at UTSA. I said this earlier before we actually got going here, but nobody gets tired about talking about 2020. Nobody ever gets tired of talking about COVID and stuff. And so if y'all wouldn't mind sharing a little bit about what it was like to basically either move into a new place to do ministry in 2020, or to basically more or less, because Kyle, you basically had to, in a sense, restart a ministry in 2020. What was that, experience like? How was it maybe different than things you had did before and that kind of thing?
I'll go first. Are we doing the alphabetical thing the whole time?
Yeah, I guess we can.
Okay. So my first gig as a BSM director, college ministry director, I started in the fall of 2019. So I got a little taste of normalcy And as it was, the role that I stepped into, it was the first full-time, I was the first full-time person there in 40 years. So it was very much, the hope was to revitalize that ministry and kind of take it to places where it hadn't been in a long time. And then I had a lot of dreams about how that was going to happen over the course of like one semester. But a lot of things happened. COVID was not the least of them that happened. And so basically over the summer of 2020, all the students I had either graduated, dropped out, they went back home and did online classes. So when we came back for the fall of 2020, basically there was one student who had been consistent in the ministry the year before, who came back and was consistent the following year. So it was pretty much a blank slate. I know everybody was kind of going back to the drawing board there during that time. But for me, it was going back to a drawing board of how do I even get people here in the first place with no student base, no student population currently in the ministry to draw from.
So, I split time because I was in Orlando when the pandemic hit. I'll just speak from like personal faith experience. It was very much a time of testing for my family and I, because we had accepted the job to move here Martin Luther King weekend of 2020, and we're super excited about it. We're just like really looking forward to all the ways that we could, come on this campus and, meet people face to face. I mean, just all the things that you would do in a typical year. And, when we got back, we didn't even tell our students in person, which was really sad in Orlando. We had to we were waiting, and then my replacement was actually hired right before we went on spring break, which ended up being like the last time that students met in person for classes for like an entire year at University of Central Florida. And so it was a very odd time because there's this sense in ministry where you are welcomed by people, and then you also say goodbye to them. And the assumption is that that's in person, and to not have that was just really odd. And there was a sense of both my wife and I wondering can we just stay here and not leave? This is a huge risk. We put our house on the market April 1st of 2020 when things were very unknown. I flew her out here to San Antonio April 20th with 2 other people on a Southwest flight. So it was just it was such an unknown time. But it was also such a beautiful formational time for us to just kind of dive into something that was extremely unknown. And then COVID was very extended here because classes really didn't resume in a typical fashion until fall of 2022. So I met up with some students in spring of 2022 asking them it's been 2 years, what are some things that have changed for you? And I mean, it was these were students who were juniors, so they would have been freshmen whenever this happened. And it was just really difficult for them to recall the past 2 years in a cohesive way, but also just to feel like they were stripped of what, could be. So anyway, it's been, I mean, that's just such a weird experience to have to go through, lockdowns and masking and all this stuff. But I feel like it's probably even going to be a few years before we experience some of the ramifications of that in some positive ways, where you see some of the resilience that people went through. So yeah, it's a good question.
Gotcha, man. And so, really should have broke some of the stuff down before we started, but it's all good. Still new to this. If it needs to be said, y'all are both free to speak on whenever y'all want to. And so if one of y'all says something that you want to reply to, or you want to ask on, or you want to go further in, y'all are more than welcome to speak up whenever y'all feel like it. I don't want y'all to feel like y'all are limited in what y'all can do. And so I just want to make that perfectly clear.
Yeah.
Sweet.
Okay, so how so obviously during that time, when you're having to rely on like technology and that kind of stuff quite a bit, with the students that you're trying to reach, because y'all are obviously trying to reach the next generation, right? What was it like trying to use technology in that time? Maybe like having to rely on it more than you probably like had to before. Because everything's kind of like locked down. You can't just walk on campus to a place where students hang out and just expect to see people there. What was it like trying to, I guess, rely on technology to basically ultimately, like in a sense, I guess, meeting strangers that you want to minister to?
Yeah. So for me during that time, about probably a month or so before the semester, I went to Instagram, and I went to our Sol Ross BSM Instagram account, and I found all the major, the Sol Ross State University Instagram account, the Sol Ross Athletics Instagram, and just all these organizations and clubs on campus. And I went and I followed every single person who was already following them. And that's how I got several students into the ministry. And I was just reminded of this about a month ago. John, Madison. She's actually coming to be an intern for me next school year, and that is her story about how she first found out about the BSM is that she got an Instagram follow, and then through that found out about our events. So for me, technology, and I was not, because our ministry was so small, we didn't have a large group gathering, so I can't speak into live streaming or anything like that, or recording video sermons, because that just wasn't a part of who we were. So I don't have any insight onto that kind of technology. But as far as social media, it was a good way to connect with people. Obviously, it worked out. We had several students who had that same story. It was their first meeting and interaction of us was through the internet, which is kind of strange, because even as recently as 10 years ago, that wouldn't have really been a thing, but it was for us. Yeah. So I guess we just had to improvise, do what we could. Ended up working out okay. Thankful that we're not there anymore. Thankful that we can do face-to-face stuff. But
for sure.
So the use of technology, we had to adapt quickly.
So one interesting thing is that I was actually pretty proficient in Zoom whenever this had happened, because I had used it a lot for just stuff with RUF National and communicating with people from all over the country and sometimes the world. And so I had used it fairly well, and was able to navigate that by doing large group ministry in like the spring of 2020. So we finished out our year doing that, but it was interesting to see how easily bad actors could get in there, or people that wanted to try to cause a disruption could do so. So that was the case on Zoom. That was the case on Instagram, where people were making fake accounts. So that was really frustrating and really disturbing. And then just the political stuff that kind of came out of that too, with the George Floyd murder, and just some of the political posturing that happened in 2020 because it was an election year. And then people were at home, not hanging out with other people. I think that for many students, it kind of took them to a new level of crazy that they were already kind of leaning toward. And so I had to deal with that a lot in Florida. I dealt with that a little bit in Texas, but it wasn't quite as severe. And And so that just gave me like a really, really bad taste in my mouth for doing much on social media. So yeah, definitely did kind of the same stuff that Kyle's suggesting, the Instagram following, DMing, which is awkward for a guy in his 30s to DM an 18-year-old kid. But it's sort of something you have to do in order to like connect with people. And I still do. And it's still awkward. And then if you don't know what DMing is, dear listener, it's direct messaging, and it's just the way that you send a message. Or if you're on Facebook, it would be using Messenger, and on Instagram, you can just do that on Instagram. So, anyway, so that, so I mean, like it was kind of a new ball game in terms of like having to rely on social media and technology. I think, 2021 school year, I spent a lot of time with like the 6 students that we had connected with. And I had a good friend who actually does RUF at the University of Vermont, who suggested to like a smaller group of guys, like, hey, we're going to have smaller ministries this year. Let's try to cultivate that little garden that we have and just really go deep with it. And I just kind of took that with me and just thought like, yes, I'm a gardener of a little bitty garden this year, and it's okay that we're not planting new stuff during the year. And so, yeah, I think for that school year, I didn't pay as much attention to it. But if you were to go look at our Instagram profile, I mean, we've really tried to like improve the way that we're communicating with people through something like Instagram, with, the graphics that we use, videos that we occasionally use, reels, things like that, in order to speak to people of this generation.
So you just talked about it's awkward being a 30-something-year-old man DMing college students. If I've told you the story before, I'm sorry. But when we first were church planting out in West Texas, the job that I had was working for a third-party nonprofit that was a partnership with the university, and we were supposed to help improve like retention for students that were deemed, I guess, high risk or whatever terminology they used. And when the professors would reach out to us if they weren't going to class and stuff, and we were supposed to like find them and say, hey, go to class. And that was supposed to make them go to class. And so sometimes I don't know if y'all know this, but sometimes college students don't respond to text messages.
Neither do I. It's okay.
That's right.
And so like when they wouldn't respond to like text messages or DMs or Messenger and those things, we were instructed to go wait for them outside of the door of one of their other classes. Keep in mind, I've never met some of these people. And so there was one, or we were supposed to like go knock on their dorm room. Keep in mind, I've never met these people.
You're like the Grim Reaper at this point.
Dude, like seriously. Man. And so like there was
did you have a staff with you and a mask? Like, wow.
I probably should have, man. I didn't have the beard at this time either. And so I don't know if that helps.
My mind is blown.
But like there was a freshman girl, man, who wasn't going to class. And it's already awkward, man, being like an adult, like messaging 18 and 19-year-olds who don't know you. That's already awkward enough. But they told me, you need to go find her, you need to go hunt her down. It's like, you need to go be the person that's going to make an impact in her life and more or less kind of like, in a sense, save this students. And it's going to be because of you that they finish college, get their degree, and blah, blah, blah. And so they told me to go to her dorm room, go to her dorm room and go knock on her door. And I was like, I'm not going to prison today, man. Like, that's not on my list of things to do. Like, I'm 30 plus years old. Like, I'm not going to go creepily go onto an 18-year-old girl's dorm. I'm technically not an employee of the university. I'm in partnership with the university.
Yeah.
They don't know me. They don't know, well, why have I got this person's dorm? No, like I'm not going to jail today. I'm not getting cuffed.
We could take this.
Yeah, I think that's how I end up quitting.
We could really take this podcast episode in some unique ways, just for Kyle and I to talk about all of the things that churches have assumed that we could do to reach out to students or to get to know students that are illegal and or terrible. So,
do you feel comfortable sharing any of those things?
When we stop recording, maybe.
That's right. Yeah.
It'll be the members only segment that doesn't exist yet.
Pay John money, and then you get to hear the really you get to hear the after party.
Man.
No kidding.
Y'all can join us at the Cigar Lounge afterwards, and we'll talk about that.
I think we can go ahead and sign off because I have my new evangelism method for next year. Show up in an 18-year-old's dorm room. What could go wrong?
And for anybody who might be listening, I'm just kidding. Kyle does not go to cigar lounges. I'm just joking.
Yeah, actually. You're making me seem like a stick in the mud. Like I don't, but it's not because I have like some kind of conviction, but it's a personal choice.
Just a personal choice, man. Yeah. And only that, right? It's just a personal choice. Yeah.
Yes.
So like on the note of like we don't have like on the note of like things that people think y'all can do and should do. Kind of trying to like to go off of that. I guess what are some of the things that you enjoy about college ministry that you probably would never have guessed or would not have thought about, and that kind of thing?
That's kind of tough because I've been.
Please don't say.
I mean, wait, what? Oh no!
Say like everything.
I was going to say like the part of the question where you said that I didn't expect to enjoy, because like I was kind of brought into, I guess, more spiritual maturity within the context of college ministry, so it's always kind of been a part of my life. So I've kind of always, ever since I've known ministry was what I was going to do, I've kind of known some of the ins and outs of college ministry. But I guess maybe the one thing that I can say, like the thing that I really enjoy about where I'm at now is that I feel like this is, for the first time in my life, the long-term plan. Like I could be in San Angelo for 10, 20, 30 years, and I think I'd be okay with that. And I've never been able to say that about another place I've been in, or, I've been in college and didn't have an idea of what I was going to do next. So I would say just the being able to be strategic and being able to plan and think about, okay, how is what we're doing today going to affect our ministry a year from now, 3 years from now, 5, 10 years from now, when none of the students who are here now will still be here, but how is what we're doing now affecting what we're going to be in the future? Because that's another great thing about college ministry is that if you kind of have a bad year or you don't like a student, they're going to be gone in 4 years. So you just got to kind of wait that out, and then you can just kind of try again. You can start over. But yeah, it does provide a challenge. Things are always changing. There's constant turnover, but it also provides opportunities to grow your ministry at a much more rapid pace, or at a much more sustainable pace than, church ministry, where, you could be dealing with the same people for 50 years.
Yeah, that's, yeah.
Yeah. Man, I would say a lot of things. Goodness gracious. So one thing is that the college that I went to is very different than the colleges that I've served at. So, in some ways I get to re-experience college, but also get to see myself through these students. I went to a private Southern Baptist college in Alabama, where it was just assumed that everyone was a Christian and they weren't. But yeah, so but it was like a really beautiful place for me to be at that time because I was not very grounded in much at all, and I really needed. The Lord used that time in some beautiful ways. And then I've worked at two predominantly commuter colleges who are, very secular and going after secular ideals. But that, like, as the Lord has, like, shaped my story and, like, I went to college and graduated in 2006 and then went to seminary and did a 5-year plan and then worked in mental health for a couple of years and then went back into college ministry. So I'd spent some time away from college ministry and kind of went to the next generation, essentially. And so it was, so it took a lot of learning. I heard this little thing on a podcast that I listened to that one of the things that was really intriguing for this host about Tim Keller is that he actually wasn't that great of a preacher for his first 10 years of ministry, and that actually gave me a lot of hope because I adore Tim Keller. I think he's the most formative person in my life for ministry. I've met him one time and was able to glean from his wisdom for hours, hundreds of, probably thousands of hours. And just to know that he struggled for a long time. And guys, if you would have told me at 21 that I would be doing this right now, I would have laughed in your face because I stood in front of our college ministry and tried to read a passage of scripture that was maybe 7 verses long and tripped over almost every word. And I'm a nervous reader as it is. And I'm not that great of a preacher, but the Lord has done just enough to teach me and to give me a desire to want to reach students and to equip them to serve that I'm still doing this. And sometimes I just want to slap myself because I'm how am I still in this dream job and doing this thing? At the same time, it's really hard because the flip side of what Kyle's saying is that you have amazing people that you interact with, and sometimes they're only in your ministry for a year, and then you say goodbye to them, or maybe 6 months, and at best they're there for 3 years, doing something substantial. So yeah, it's a great. I think it's the best type of ministry, but it's also really, really hard. It's a lot. Let me put it that way.
No, yeah, for sure, man, for sure. Knowing that Tim Keller was not that great of a preacher for the first 10 years of his ministry is something that I'm going to find some comfort in.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, man.
How far short of you are of 10 years, John?
So, I think Alpine was 6 or 7 years. Okay. The first 1 or 2 years of that was more house churchy kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah. So, I don't know. I guess I can call it 6. I got a couple years left, man. I got a couple years left for me to get it together. So, in your time as doing college ministry, how has y'all's understanding or maybe theology of just the evangelism and missions and that, just ministry in general, shifted and developed?
I would say, particularly with working with college students, it has just become so apparent to me through just observing, but also just listening to stories from other college ministers, from other campus ministries, that this generation, well, not just this generation, but college students in general, they've always been the most sendable generation, the most sendable demographic of people. Because when else in your life are you going to have the opportunity to just kind of do whatever you want to with the summer, where it's like you can take summer classes, or you could go off for 3 months and do missions, or kind of between the college and adult phase, to dedicate a year, 2 years to be a ministry intern, or to go and do journeyman, or be some other kind of missionary. And so a recent conviction that I've had, I went to a collegiate ministry conference about a month ago, but basically, if I could just summarize my takeaway from that, it was, if our vision as a college ministry with so many sendable students, if my vision isn't global, if my vision isn't to send missionaries out to the nations, then my vision is too small. Because we can grow a really big campus ministry that has a lot of really cool stuff, a lot of really cool meetings, fun events. However, the number of unreached people has only grown over the past, decade, 20, 30, 50 years, even though we live in a world that's somehow more accessible, and it somehow seems smaller than it's ever been as far as communicating with people, as far as going other places. However, the number of unreached people has grown. It will continue to grow as long as we just kind of keep up this current pace. So that's kind of where my theology has shifted, and it's growing more towards a global Christianity. What are we doing now that's going to eventually affect the nations?
I'm going to take this question a little bit differently. Sorry, John. I always mess you up in conversations.
Do it.
But this is a very reluctant generation. Reluctant because, they love comfort, and I think in particular, being in San Antonio, you have people who have generational reasons why they shouldn't serve overseas that I can't really argue with, anyway. So I think that there's a complicated factor where we're looking at people in a particular stage of life who are, I totally agree with what Kyle's saying. They are extremely sendable. They are great candidates to serve overseas. At the same time, it's not bad for them to be in their place and live at home with mom and dad and to work a typical job. But so just to put it on the local perspective, I have met maybe one student in my 3 years here who's brought a person to church with them. And that one person has brought 2 people to an RUF anything. And so that actually makes at least my context of campus ministry really challenging, because you're reaching one to reach one. And the theory is that campus ministry theory is you reach students in order for them to reach other students. And I think that even looking at it from this perspective, the number of clubs on a particular campus has grown to monstrous proportions, because people aren't okay with just being a part of the medical society. They want to be a part of the Hispanic Medical Society or part of the PT Society. You know what I'm saying? So it's it's so very particular for that person and their experience. And so even something like RUF, some students are they're that's my precious, and they unfortunately won't even share that with them. And so I think that even extends out to evangelism, to mission. At the same time, so many of these students are they're so ripe for doing that type of work, because they've had to deal with the social pressures that we've been around, and they've been that's been the foundation in which they're living into. And so having to engage someone who is gay or trans they can engage the person without a lot of the boundaries that a person that didn't grow up in that kind of society have. And so I think that like the long term, again, kind of like wrapping in with what Kyle was saying, like the long term hope is like these are going to be amazing ministers and amazing missionaries. We just have to like encourage the heck out of them way more than I feel like even 5 years ago we had to encourage students. I don't know if do you sense that, Kyle, in your context at Angelo State?
So you're saying to encourage them in. Sorry, can you ask the question?
To encourage them with anything ministry related, really, but evangelism, going on mission, even going to like a retreat. You have to just like do much more work in order to say like, this is good for you. This is something that you should do.
I got you. Yeah. Yeah. I think I heard somebody say not too long ago, the moment you think you're starting to be redundant is probably the moment you're starting to be effective.
Yep.
So yeah, I can definitely relate to that. I've done campus ministry for a few years, but maybe not really been around for, a decade, so I can compare to back, 10 years ago. But yes, I do think they need to be encouraged and need to be constantly reminded of why we do what we do, constantly. And I don't know if if that's a generational thing or if that's just a young person thing, just without the scope that maybe someone like you or I would have. Just re-emphasizing why we do what we do. Yeah.
I heard it said that repeat something over and over again until you want to throw up and then say it again, which is kind of the same thing. I don't think it's a generational thing though. I think it's just a Western culture thing, honestly. Because like people like, I mean, maybe it's a Western culture thing. Maybe it's getting, it's just expanding, I guess is one other way of putting it. But like, because people, or man, maybe I don't.
Yeah, I think it probably is. It probably is a Western thing, because our society and pretty much every facet is so consumer driven, to where it's like I've got to convince my students that hey, missions is the best option, or doing this with our organization instead of this other campus club, like this is the best option. So it's not just like hey, this is important, but this is the most important. This isn't good. This is the best. And the more and more choice they have, the more and more, like Lee was saying, specific options they have, the more and more that's going to be a challenge.
Yeah, because I mean, I can think back to because when we were church planning, when we were working with college students, and then when I was in college, I didn't go to Christian college, but I was involved in college ministry. And so it seems like there's always been this need for a reminder or encouragement. Here's kind of like, here's why we exist. Here's what we're here for. Not just while you're in college, but once you graduate and you get a job or wherever it is that God sends you, you're still in that place for the same reasons in a sense. And so like, it seems like people are continuously always, needing like that encouragement and needing that reminder and needing that accountability, because like I think Lee, like you kind of like said, like for some people RUF is kind of like my precious, that's a Harry Potter thing, right?
Lord of the Rings, Gollum.
Come on, even I knew that one. I don't even watch either of those things.
I'm just kidding. But like even like because I remember like being kind of having to fight that myself when I was a student, and man, like sometimes like, and I think I still kind of have to like catch myself like wrestling with that sometimes with certain things, still like to this day. And so, I mean, I think that it could possibly be like, it's possibly like a cultural thing. I don't know.
I think there's some of that. I mean, I've had conversations. So, I'm like an ordained minister, so I preach at a ton of churches, and it's really interesting whenever the random guy comes and preaches at your church. Like I'm going to the Rio Grande Valley, to preach this weekend, and it's funny how like open people will be about what they think about the church whenever the pastor's not around, and in like big churches or little bitty churches, like they have like very strong opinions about what they dislike, and so I mean, there's like a spoiledness to it that I think like Western Christians have, toward the church and toward like Christianity as well. So yeah.
Because I think especially like when you do like it's like it's a small ministry, because like I think all of us are predominantly been involved with smaller ministries, correct? Even like at UTSA, like y'all are smaller ministry.
Yep.
Like students will get like that sense of ownership for the ministry, which can be a really good thing.
Yep.
But when that sense of ownership turns into that thing where it's like, well, why do we want to go and evangelize and bring somebody new in who's just going to mess up what we have going? Or they're just going to make it awkward, or I'm not going to feel comfortable anymore, which they might go back to that comfort thing that you were talking about.
Yeah.
And so like, there's that, and I think that continuously, like, there's that, you need to have that reminder that like, that's not necessarily what this is about. Like, yes, this is, in a sense, this is your ministry because RUF or BSM exist for the building you up, but it also can be that other person's as well.
Sí, señor.
Yes, sí. Let's see, man. Let's see. So, Kyle, you said that y'all used Instagram a lot, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Lee, did you say that like Instagram is like y'all's go-to also?
Yeah.
Do y'all use like TikTok or Snapchat or other kind of stuff?
Nope.
No, we don't.
We have Facebook. Facebook for the parents, Instagram for the students.
I kind of feel like Instagram is turning more into parents, and as like a billboard for students. Like they see it and they're like, oh yeah, there's something with RUF tonight, but it's parents that are liking it more than students.
I was at like a church planning conference once, and and it was a church planning conference that was kind of focused on like planning churches in like the university towns, and they basically said use Facebook to reach the community and use Instagram to reach the students, and that kind of stuck with me for a while.
Mm-hmm.
But since then, like TikTok has kind of like taken over, and some other things have taken over also. And so like, I think we're all old enough that this can be like a fun conversation or an interesting one, I guess. But how do you see the way that like social media is affecting like the younger people of today compared to like how it was maybe when we were growing up with it?
That was such an old person question that I'm going to reframe for you. How is social media affecting people today?
Yeah, just today. Thanks, Doctor.
No, that's funny. Sorry,
Kyle.
Kyle, you don't know me well enough.
He's studied everything.
Yeah. So seriously. I'm here to learn.
Yeah, you were both here to learn, man. Like Lee studied like theology, doctor stuff, and some other things I forgot.
Doctor stuff? Like medical?
Yep, I was a pre-med major in college.
Yep. Oh, heck yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm married to an author too, so there's that as well.
I feel like that's the equivalent of like Ben Shapiro with like Ben Shapiro's like, my wife's a doctor. My wife's a doctor. Your wife's an author.
That's right. That's right.
Go ahead, man.
Yeah, social media is cigarettes in the 1950s. It's the most, like, the Surgeon General is saying, like, this is dangerous. It's not something that you should do. You shouldn't be, you know, like, and like the professionals are using it to extremes. The people that know better, are using it, and they know that it's bad for them. So it's kind of like in Mad Men, if you guys ever saw that show, like the doctor who's smoking, like, while Don Draper's wife is like getting her, I don't know, her baby checkup. And you're just like, wow, that was a different day, like the 1950s. They knew that there were problems with cigarettes, because the whole show is shaped around cigarettes anyway. And yeah, you just know that, like, this is a pretty toxic thing, and yet it's something that's probably going to be around for a long time. So yeah, I mean, I don't know. I might be in the minority, but I see a lot of students that are kind of like revolting against kind of the typical ways of social media, and how it engages them, and they're trying to use it more as a tool than as a crutch, I guess. And they're not saying, like, I have to have social media in order to be, successful or happy or whatever. So that's encouraging. I think that, like, I mean, I could see us not using as much social media in the next couple of years, because students are not really wanting to be on it and really wanting, like, the face-to-face personal touch. So I'm more hopeful with that. I'm concerned about, like, attention spans, especially with, like, middle school and high school kids. But I just did a retreat for middle school kids, and my wife and I did, like, a 25-minute talk, and they, like, wanted more, which I was so encouraged by. At the same time, I did not see a single phone that entire retreat, which was amazing. So
was that, like, a part of the rules?
Like, what's that?
Was that a part of the rules that you couldn't have your phone out?
I don't know. I don't.
Okay.
I'm hopeful that, like, these kids don't have phones. I mean,
yeah,
that's kind of like our goal, is for our kids not to have phones until they're in high school. But yeah, I mean, cigarettes, they're the cigarettes of the 1950s, is my saying. I borrowed from somebody else.
When your kids get to high school, man, are you going to give them those prepaid, like, Net 10 phones with, like, a $10 prepaid card kind of thing?
You said words that I don't understand, so I guess I don't know, man.
Dude, okay, so, like, they're the phones that come in a box. You'll see them sometimes, like, at the register of, like, a Dollar General or a gas station or something, and
the burner.
They're like, yeah, there you go. Dumb phones, burner phones, clamshells. Yeah.
Yeah, I really like that cigarette analogy. Yeah, I really like that a lot, because I think we're starting to see kind of a shift. Because obviously, if cigarettes back in the day, I think some people even believed at first, like, cigarettes are good for me, and then it became cigarettes are probably not good, and then it became cigarettes are bad, and the data kind of shows that smoking cigarettes is kind of it's on a decline culturally. And I think 10 years ago, when I was a college student, I had social media. It was kind of in the earlier days, but it was definitely an established thing. Everybody had Instagram, everybody had Facebook. And then when people started to say social media is having a negative effect on us, it was just kind of like, yeah, but probably not. It's not that bad. And now we're getting to a point culturally where I think everybody is looking around the room and saying, yeah, this has negatively affected all of us. So the students now, they're more aware than I was 10 years ago of, like you said, Lee, they're aware of, like, maybe I should dial this back, or maybe I should rethink the way that I use social media. And that's because of, the studies that have happened over the past, 10, 12, 15 years as long as we've had things like Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, TikTok. So I am also encouraged when I hear my students say, kind of on their own volition, like, I'm going to limit my screen time. Screen time, like, I'd never heard of that 10 years ago, but now screen time is something that everybody knows about. And it's always a bad thing. The more time you spend on your screen, the more adverse effects it has on us. So I'm also very encouraged by that, and I've also seen that happen. Something else I'll add with, social media technology. I'm reading a book right now, and I'm kind of in the middle of it, but it's called The Life We're Looking For, and it's all about how to. The subtitle is, I've got it right in front of me. It's Reclaiming Relationship in a Technological World.
I've got that book.
And he sets up one chapter talking about. Oh, you have it? Have you read it?
Nice. Most of it, yeah. Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I'm only a few chapters in, but I like it so far.
Don't tell
but in chapter 3,
he kind of friends, but he is a Presbyterian.
Yeah, actually, I got this. A Baptist pastor recommended this book to me, so I shift all the blame to him.
That's right.
But in the book, he sets up he starts in chapter 3 talking about, kind of the Industrial Revolution, like 100, 150 years ago, when we started having things like cars, trains, even airplanes. Those things kind of made us feel like we were superhuman. And then in chapter 4, he talks about how with the onset of this technological renaissance or revolution, it's almost like we have magic in the palm of our hands at all times. So whereas 100 years ago, when we had things like cars and whatnot, that made us superhuman. But today it's almost like we're magicians, because even 30 years ago, we couldn't have fathomed what it was like to have the power that we have in the palm of our hands with just a cell phone. And kind of the danger of it is some technology, it just affected the way we did things, right? We got places faster. But with technology, it not only affects the way we do things, but it affects who we are. Like it's a part of our core identity, like our, who we are online, who we are on the internet. So it's not just like, oh yeah, I got to work in 5 minutes today. It's my life and my identity is wrapped up in my Instagram followers, which is a really scary and dangerous place to be.
Yeah.
Because we as humans...
go ahead.
Yeah, I just say, we as humans, I don't even know if we were created to handle that. Like God is sovereign over all things, so I don't think it's caught him by surprise. But there's something that we haven't figured out about, how do we handle this correctly? So I think that's kind of going back to what Lee said. The conversation is shifting in that direction of, okay, we have this, and it's got these negative effects, so what do we do about it now?
Yeah. No, that's a really good word, Kyle. And that book is amazing, and Andy Crouch is amazing. And his discussion on AI in that book, I think it might be like chapter 7, I'm not sure, was so helpful, because that's when like ChatGPT became like this monster that students were using to like write papers, and it was like the cheat code for everything. It reminded me a little bit of like back in the day whenever like Cliff Notes came out in the 90s, and then like you could cheat and like read the Scarlet Letter in quotes, and then like write a paper on it, and like ChatGPT just enabled you to like write something about something you had no idea what it was. And anyway, but it's funny how like he's making the point that like technology will not take over humanity, because like there's something about being made in the image of God that's just so much better than something that can spit out an algorithm to you. Even if it's well written, it's not going to be good enough. And that's just like such good news. And I do sense that students on our campuses are like they're kind of tired of like machines running things, and they'd much rather like a human being. Like I actually think that they want to see us as like pretty fallible, and they want to see us like mess up our words. So maybe it's really good news for me, John, because I'm not like that great of a preacher or speaker person, that like I don't have to be super fluid, because and two, with like narcissists like taking over certain sectors, especially ministry, like there's a certain amount of like skepticism that comes with someone being like really really good at speaking and explaining things. It's like, why are you here to manipulate me in some way? So yeah, I'm all for humans doing the work of the world, to multiply, subdue the earth, those Genesis 1 things. Down for that.
I mean, y'all said so much, I don't know where to pick up from.
We're just playing ping pong over here, like that. We're just being college ministers. That's what it is, dude.
Yeah, it's more of a conversation between us.
Because there's because I'm kind of like I'm with y'all. Like I'm on the hopeful side of this. Like I generally, for the most part, like I'm with y'all on what y'all said. At the same time, I think that we still kind of have to be careful with what we are developing in this world, like with technology and AI and that kind of thing. Because I'm not on one of those people, which I don't. Neither one of y'all are, who is going to go out there and say, "Oh, this stuff is evil." I'm not going to say social media is evil. I'm not going to say AI is evil. I'm not into all that kind of stuff. Just like with everything that humans create, there's good and bad that come along with it, right? But I'm on the hopeful end that, like you said, like you think that students care about authenticity, right? It's probably a good thing when like we're not overly polished, because like I'm encouraged by that also, because like I'm not an overly polished person. Like I cannot speak a sentence without messing a word up. It's impossible. And so I mean, like I'm kind of with you on that. I am curious though, trying to go back to like the beginning of what I think this started with this portion. I'm really curious as to how, when you say like you're encouraged when you hear your students say that they're going to cap their screen time and that kind of thing. I'm really curious as to like how many are saying that compared to how many aren't, and how many are actually kind of like following through with that. Because according to like the data and everything that I'm reading, it doesn't seem like a lot of people within like Gen Z and that kind of thing are actually doing that.
Well, I think that college students, for as long as video games have been around, have spent way too much time on screens. I mean,
yeah.
I pulled an all-nighter one time, beating like a first generation Nintendo game, which was idiotic, with some friends.
Only once.
What game was it?
Dude, it was it was that like the NBA game where you had the big heads. What was it called? NBA Jam.
Dude, that wasn't stupid.
It was in a track locker room and it was stinky. So anyway, just the whole situation was like ridiculous.
Yeah. That was getting weird.
But God's at work through that even. Yeah. So I mean, I feel like it's a snapshot that tells a story of like the average 18 to 22-year-old. That's my 2 cents. Kyle, do you have wisdom?
I agree. For me, it wasn't. I was more in like the PS3 days, but I agree, and I'm very familiar with the all-night video game sessions, all-night NCAA tournaments. We would do that for sure.
It was for me, it was Madden and Halo that caused the all-nighters.
Yeah.
But like, I cannot pick up video games, dude. No matter, I've tried a few times over the past. After getting married, I tried to pick them back up a few times, and I ended up just wasting money on something I didn't use.
Mm-hmm. I play Mario Kart with my son, and that's really fun. But
yeah,
like he has other little games on Switch, and I just can't. I can do like 5 minutes of it, and I'm wanting to do something else.
I do like the game with the fighting food. It's like the toast and the they have the swords and they cut each other in half.
No idea.
So lone. All right, man. So, do y'all think there's a link between like technology or social media and like the rising amount of like mental health issues that we're seeing like with students in the college age?
I'm not smart enough to say yes, but I will say probably.
Probably.
Yeah. And I think it kind of goes back to having our identities wrapped up in it.
Yeah.
To where it is like an addiction where, you know, as an addiction progresses, it's, I need more. Need more dopamine hits. Need more followers, need more likes, need more engagement. Need more everything, and it comes to a point where that just stops coming in. So it has to affect people adversely.
Yeah, I think Kyle made the case for the yes answer. Yeah, I mean, I think that the theory is that like social media has a positive impact on particular strains of society for people who are like left out, who are kind of on the margins, and I think it actually like makes things worse for them. And it, I mean, at the same time, like, okay, so quick aside, like I just like put together and then did like a long seminar for 4 hours on mental health with some students and from all around the country. And one of the interesting things is that I felt like I was attempting to like walk on some grenades whenever I was talking about things like depression, anxiety. We even talked about suicide. And I was really intrigued by how they were willing to like go into those categories. And they weren't afraid of them. Like full disclosure, I would probably not talk about suicide in the context of a church because I think it's there's just too many people that are really afraid of that word, and it would have to be like individual conversations to talk about something that's that heavy. But I sat in front. I was in front of a group of almost 100 college students and addressed that topic, and you know, talked about just the sadness of it, the desperation of it, but there's a better hope in. So what one of the things I thought was like most appealing in my research of looking at suicide is that like there's a philosophy that people live by that allows them to stay alive, and my thing to students was like, you can go and find a philosophy that makes you feel good, but like the gospel story, and I'm like almost brought to tears whenever I'm telling these students like that is just so much better to know that like, yes, you're redeemed. You're not perfectly redeemed in this moment, but like you have a hope that you're looking forward to in Christ. And, you know, to live is Christ, even in your suicidality and in your desire to not want to be alive. But then, you know, once you die, like it is a gain. And so that is just such a better hope that you're living into, rather than saying like, my life is actually a good and a fun and a happy thing for me, which is kind of like a modern secular way of viewing it. So yeah. And I think that like that philosophy is like what social media produces, is like my life is good or good enough and I can be happy. And that's just not enough. Like the gospel story, the gospel message is just so much better. A quick like thumbs up to social media. We had a student who came to our ministry by way of YouTube, no joke. And not because I produced anything on YouTube, but he had been binging YouTube videos, and somehow the algorithm brought him to a preacher who was doing like Bible studies online. So he binged like something like 18 hours of videos, and then like found that we were on campus, like outside doing a Bible study, and came in and like had all this knowledge. And I was like, dude, where have you grown up? And he's like, I have binge videos for like the past 2 days. And so like that ability to like acquire information through something like, because YouTube is a social media platform as well, is just really intriguing. But man, these are like sheep without a shepherd at that point. And they can definitely be brought into some like, wicked stuff, or some things that try to syncretize their faith into politics or, social justice, or into something else. So, yeah.
Kyle, what do you think, man?
I already answered this question.
Did you already answer the question? I don't remember that.
Because that was a lot more profound than what I said. So just edit it out. Do whatever you need to do.
No way, man. Your conciseness was way better, bro.
I'm just gonna edit myself out of the whole thing and see kind of how that goes. So on the topic of mental health and stuff, man. If I can ask this, because I try to understand that when we're in this conversation, that like people are gonna watch it and that kind of thing.
That's the hope.
How do y'all? I know it is the whole point. Basically, what I'm trying to say is that like I understand like y'all students are gonna watch this stuff, and so how do y'all walk with people who are like dealing like with like mental health stuff, right? Like whether it be like depression or something along those lines, because like mental health is it's a, for lack of at the risk of being lacking sensitivity, it's a trendy thing. It's a trendy thing because we know more about it more than we ever have, and then there's also the risk of people. Well, I want to fit in. I want to be a part of it. I want to be broken too. So I have a mental health issue. I have depression. I have that kind of thing. And that seems to be something that's more common, like with college students and that generation. And so like, how do y'all walk through with students through those things?
I would say I encourage, or I recognize my own abilities or inabilities, or my own limitations, I guess would be a better way to say that. And always giving the student like the benefit of the doubt that what they're telling me, like they're genuinely struggling, is just to validate that and say, okay, what steps do we need to take, and then checking in on them often, but also in recognizing my limitations, refer them to counseling. And if counseling is something they'll benefit from and something they do benefit from, they'll continue to seek it. But just always checking in on them. And I think the biggest thing you can do when somebody confides something like that to you, is like, don't freak out. Don't be like, oh my gosh, like you really are messed up. You really are broken. This hasn't really been something I've dealt with or walked with a lot of students in my career yet, but there have been a few. But yeah, just don't freak out. Don't say like, wow, you're really broken. You need to be fixed in this way. It's just like, okay, well, this is a prevalent thing, a predominant thing in our culture. So let's get you the help you need. Let's take some actions to get you what you need.
Yeah, no, that's really good. Yeah, I mean, knowing your limitations, just to like piggyback off what Kyle's saying, is so important. And that was one of the things that I had to learn like almost immediately, because I had done counseling and I had like dipped into some really hardcore mental health stuff. Because I think as a campus minister, you could very easily get a savior complex, because these students are listening to a lot of what you're saying, and you could like take over their mental health care and do good work, but not necessarily like the best work for them, because they really need to maybe figure things out on their own at some points. Gosh, there was something else that you said, Kyle, that I wanted to bounce off of too. The worst thing for them is isolation, and that is like what social media wants to drive them towards. The best thing for them is community. The best thing for them is a gospel-centered community that loves Jesus and points them to the cross and reminds them of like how good God is, and continues to show them, like the ineffectiveness of like the secular world. So yeah, I mean, like, yeah, but I mean, counselors, my wife's a counselor. I've been sending people to like her agency for like 9 years now, because I believe in them, and it's grown a ton because of the pandemic. Yeah. And then but it's like, it's a holistic thing. Like, it's community, it's having, some really good trusted friends. It's having like pastors who you can hang out with and talk with things about. It's also knowing like psychiatrists in your area, if possible, to be able to like get in front of someone, and psychiatrists that you trust too, because, medicine is a practice, and sometimes there are people who will hand out pills because they just don't want to like engage with a person for more than 3 minutes. And so anyway, like, yeah, we could do an entire episode on like mental health care and all that, but yeah, at the end of the day, like, you really want to like help them see that there is like hope outside of like just the stuff that they're dealing with the anxiety, depression, bipolar, psychosis, whatever it is. And for them to like believe the gospel, and for them to know like, hey, there's other people here too.
I appreciate that both of y'all said that, the thing about knowing your limitations, man. Because, like, I mean, Lee said a second ago, there can be this, which is a really weird, when you actually break it down, it doesn't make this kind of weird thing, but there's like this savior complex that you can kind of like, a lot of times unintentionally step into when you're leading a ministry. Yeah. Because there's like, it may not be you thinking, well, I am the person that's going to fix everything, but you kind of like get this pressure from somewhere where you feel like, well, I'm a minister, I'm supposed to have answers. Mm-hmm. And then you start to feel that pressure of like, well, if I don't have the answers, then what good am I, kind of thing, which is not healthy at all whatsoever. And so like, I think being aware of and being comfortable like with your limitations is a good thing, because if you're not, man, you could unintentionally end up doing like some serious damage. And so like y'all said that community is kind of is an important thing. And like, I understand that none of us are doctors, and nobody here is like giving a prescription or any of those kind of things. But like, do you think that some of the stuff that we see going on that tends to be under, because we're like, mental health right now is kind of a wide umbrella, like, right? We're calling a lot of things mental health issues, right? Mm-hmm. And so like, do y'all think that some of that stems from sometimes people feeling lonely, not having something that they can kind of call like not having community, not having like a church that they're like involved in, and that kind of thing. Do you think that that kind of what's kind of cultivated some of the stuff, maybe, possibly?
Are you talking generally as culture has gone away from Christianity, then that specific church community has diminished? Is that what you're asking?
I guess, yeah, we can say.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I think you could say it has something to do with it, because I feel like we've talked about like the secular world. It makes promises it's not able to deliver on. So the further we dive into a secular culture, a secular society, the more and more we're promised, but the more and more we don't receive, and the more and more we're left lacking and wanting. Whereas if we're in Christ-centered community, there is a sense of fulfillment that comes with that, and there's a sense. I think that's where grace comes into play. Is that there is grace for when you do fall short, and there's grace for when we don't do things the correct way. And in like a gospel-centered community, you feel you I guess you get that sense of progression maybe more than in secularism, where in secularism you're constantly striving for something that you're promised, but maybe never going to receive.
Yeah, no, that's true. So one of my concerns is that we have, okay, so do y'all know what code switching is? Where you have to speak kind of like a different language and a different way of talking when you're in different contexts. So it's typically, it's something that like, I think it came out of like racial minorities saying like, when I'm in a more white context, I speak this way. When I'm in a more like, black context.
Oh, okay.
So
yeah.
I feel that whenever I'm around people in a church, I assume that they don't talk about mental health struggles. And I assume that it's something that's kind of more under the surface. When I'm in a college context, I assume that that's the majority of what they're talking about. And so I think that's where I feel a lot of tension, is that like when I'm on the campus, mental health is like primary, it's in your face, it's everywhere. When I'm in the church, I feel like it's tertiary, maybe. Like it's something that isn't really addressed a whole lot. It's something that isn't as big of a deal. I don't know. And so, and that extends out to, even things like ADHD and autism. And, I feel like there are kind of like less categories for that in a lot of church settings. But like at the other side, on the college context, it's like there's like an elevation of the disorders and the person that has those types of struggles. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think that can be like, maybe I'm more sensitive to it whenever I see a student who isn't churched walking into a church context, knowing that like mental health is not going to be discussed a whole lot from the pulpit or in conversations with members, but I know that in the campus ministry context it will be like a big deal.
Are y'all both familiar with who NF is?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Y'all have y'all listened to his music before?
Like sporadically.
Try not to judge. Okay. So like y'all know like he's a rapper, he's a Christian, and most of his music is him talking about like his mental health struggles and that kind of thing.
Uh-huh.
So like Emily and I both have listened to like all of his stuff. And so one of the reasons like he kind of like hopped on the scene and got really popular, like within Christian circles, is because one, he was signed to one of those labels, but two, in the Christian realm, nobody else was talking about the stuff that he was talking about.
Yep.
And like nobody was talking about like I'm struggling with depression, I'm struggling with OCD, I'm struggling with like all these different kind of things. And so like within like the Christian world, like he just started going off the charts, was going platinum and all those kind of things. And now he's just like signed to like a regular label. But like Lee, you were saying about like how, well, in the church, I assume nobody talks about this because they don't really talk about it. But when I'm in like the college, on the college campus and doing that ministry, like everybody knows what these things are. And so like I kind of thought about that, like his music kind of came to my mind because he became a really big deal, like with a lot of like teens and young adults and that kind of thing, because like he was kind of like one of us in a sense. And he was actually talking about these things that like my church isn't talking about it. My pastor's not talking about it. These things are hush hush. They're all and that kind of thing. So that's just something that kind of came to my mind. So what are like, I mean, outside of just the blanket statement of like the church just needs to like start coming to terms with this and make it a reality, I guess. What are some ways that like the church could like step up on some of these things?
I work in college ministry, not church. Not my problem. No. I'll let Lee kick it off if he's got something to say.
Yeah. That's cool, man. Because, I mean, we did say that the church isn't talking about this, but when you go to campus, they are talking about this. And so it seems that, like, it would make sense that the people that are going to soon grow up to be, like, have families in the local church, they're going to be deacons, they're going to be elders, they're going to lead Bible studies and that kind of thing. Like it kind of makes sense that, like you said, like, you don't, like, a person doesn't have to have all the answers, but like the ministry to some extent needs to exist, or the acknowledging these things should be kind of happening, right?
Yep. Yeah, I mean, just to try to like synthesize it, I'm trying to learn from Kyle here. The like way of talking about something like brokenness has to include mental health challenges, and I think that it also has to be. It really has to be like contextualized in a way where, like, you know, to put it into like San Antonio context, and probably also like San Angelo, like, so that like the military guys can like receive it, and the guy who's like a 5-star general can hear like, yes, I'm broken, and I'm broken because like I'm an angry dude, and that may be because like I'm depressed. And so talking about that, like that type of stuff, and I think too, just like allowing, I don't know, like I'm a big fan of hearing people's testimonies in a shortened way, where like Jesus is front and center, but like their struggle is also put in a context where it's not just some past thing, and it's an ongoing like situation that they're dealing with, that might not be perfected. Yeah, I have a friend named Tim Mulder who just wrote a book called Suffering in Silence on his mental health struggles, and, you know, being a 40-year church member, and but he talks about like some of the frustrating ways that people have dealt with like his own mental health struggles, and then he's also talked about like people that have just been like lights to him, and they are not like mental health professionals. They're just people who like love him. And something like bipolar for a certain segment of our population is like the kiss of death. Maybe a large percentage of our population. So, yeah. Anyway, I just think that we have to like just like with many parts of society, we have to let like the outsiders in and to like let them be seen. Like the woman with the bleeding disorder, Jesus, heals, but she was probably invisible to most people. Like we have to like allow people that struggle with mental illness to be seen in the church. Kyle, what are you going to say that's going to be like 2 minutes long and not 15 minutes long?
So I think the mental health thing, we've kind of hinted at it, but I think it's, Lee, you said the word contextualize, and I think that kind of hits it on the head, because we have to contextualize, what is brokenness to this generation. And like, I don't know, I feel like, I do believe that mental health issues are higher than they have ever been. But I also believe to a certain degree, kind of like Lee said, maybe you have anger issues because you're depressed. So when former generations explained certain things away in a particular way, it was always just like, well, we just got over it. Like we just dealt with it in our own way. We just prayed about it. Or we just read the Bible, and the Bible says don't be this way, so we decided not to be that way. But every generation has their struggles, so maybe relating it to that struggle and saying that, look, this generation of young people, teens and people in their 20s, they have been raised and brought up in an entirely different world than you were brought up in. And we have to recognize that certain things like social media, or just like the state of the world, with the political turmoil and chaos that's gone on the past few years, the racial tension that's gone on the past few years, the global pandemic that's gone on the past few years, like these things, it's hard for an 18-year-old to be hopeful in today's world, because it's all they've really ever known, as long as they've ever been aware of anything. So to just kind of say, like, look, we look around in the world and we can see a lot of brokenness. Now imagine brokenness is all you've ever known. It's all you've ever seen. It's all you ever witnessed. It's hard to have hope in this world. And we probably saw the same thing, or we definitely see the same thing with war veterans. Like they've seen brokenness in ways that, most of us can't even imagine. And there's vast mental health crises among them, suicide rates among them. It's because the things that surround us, the things that we see, the things we take in, they affect us. And today's teenagers, today's 20-somethings, they didn't grow up with the white picket fences. They didn't grow up in the Leave It to Beaver age. They've grown up where everybody kind of hates each other. And that's all they see on TV. That's all they see on social media. So just really contextualizing it and saying, like, hey, look, this is a generational thing, and just because it's not been an issue for you doesn't mean we can ignore it, and it's not an issue for anyone.
That's decent.
All right.
That was much better.
Gonna edit that out.
Thank you, Kyle. I'm going to send all my sermons to you so that you can like bring them down to a much shorter level. Thank you.
Good. So
in all seriousness, man,
I could either take that as a compliment or an insult. I'm going to choose
that was
compliment.
definitely a compliment. Most definitely.
I think it was a little bit of both.
Not an insult at all. That was not a Baptist jab one bit. That was a you're the man.
Good.
And I want to grab a soda with you in San Angelo.
We'll just road trip up there one of these days.
That's right.
You did touch on something I think is pretty valuable, man. And because like it's really easy for anybody to be focused on like the doom and gloom like all the time, man. Because it seems like every time you turn on any kind of device, that something's fighting in a sense, like kind of like for your soul. And so like it can be difficult for people to like to feel a sense of hope when every time you turn around, there's something telling you be angry, upset, and depressed about this. Everybody like on top of that, everybody's being told that they're a victim for this for said reason.
Yeah.
And
yeah, it's not
so, like,
just like,
yeah.
hey, there's brokenness all around. It's there's brokenness all around, and you should be upset about it.
Yeah.
So
You should be outraged about it.
yeah,
Because outrage is a new fruit of the Holy Spirit. Sarcasm. And so like that's a that's a good point, man. And I wish one of us would have said that 45 minutes ago. Because like now, like I'm ready to go. Like I'm ready to go. Like because like that's a really good point, man. But let me ask you all this real quick. Can you tell me how Gen Z is the most tell me how Gen Z is misunderstood.
I think probably the biggest misunderstanding about Gen Z, probably that they're lazy and unmotivated. Because I feel like they're very motivated to do something, whether it's good or bad. I feel like Gen Z is very motivated. They're very just a product of the world they grew up in. You can't just be passive. You have to care about something, and you have to try to advance some sort of cause. So even if it's a good cause that I agree with or a bad cause, I see Generation Z as not being lazy, but they're very proactive in trying to convince others or win others to their side, or quote unquote evangelize other people to their point of view, which I think takes a lot of work, takes a lot of effort, and a lot of passion.
Yeah.
So would you say how are you encouraged by them at the same time?
I think in seeing value in what you do, because I feel like maybe with Gen Z, it's not, we do evangelism because we're supposed to. That's what the Bible says, which is a good reason to do evangelism. But we do evangelism because we love people, because we care about people. So I'm encouraged when I see them taking initiative to do things because it's important to them, not because it's something they should do, because there's value behind it.
Awesome, man.
I think a lot of college students have a very attuned BS meter, and they are not going to be prone to or not as prone to some charlatan trying to sell them a false bill of goods, because they will research it so hardcore to make sure. Sorry, to make sure that it is not going to be fake. And so, yeah, I mean, I the amount of knowledge that they have is beyond any other generation that's come before them. So, with that comes an incredible encyclopedia in their brains, and in their experience that can help inform what they're going to be doing with their life. And I think too, just with the way that a lot of these students navigate the world, they're thinking so many more steps ahead of me. I feel like I'm playing a chess game and I'm getting schooled every time by these students. their engagement with, I think I mentioned this the last time that I was on the podcast, like their engagement with people that are considered the other in society, that the church would consider the other, the average church member, like their engagement is so much better than I can do. And so I'm really encouraged by that. And I'm hopeful that like we're going to have a lot of pastors and people that take over from Kyle and I whenever we're old and, we can't do this any longer, who are going to be like really equipped to deal with some like really complicated things that come up in college, because it is a time of exploration, and there's more exploration that's happening now for people with their identities and with what they think about the world than there ever has been. So and I think a lot of times when college students right now they're pretty set on like, this is my identity, sexually or gender or work, what they think they're good at, and but like the places in like the college settings where they can be challenged on that, and sometimes I think campus ministries can be the most beautiful places where that challenging can happen, and sometimes the only places too. Then like there can be some real like formation that happens. But I don't think like most college institutions are trying to form people. They're just trying to like put on some clothing onto the formation that's already happened to that person and kick them out the door and make them a good worker or a good professor or whatever.
All right, man. That's interesting. In addition to Andy Crouch, what are you reading?
I'm a one book at a time kind of guy. I can't.
Okay, what did you just finish?
Gosh, the most recent thing I finished. Come back to me.
All right,
seriously, Lee, you can go. I gotta think.
Lee, what are you reading, man?
I'm reading a ton of stuff. I'm reading a novel about a kid that came into our country undocumented called Solito. It's really interesting. I'm reading a book about ministry by a guy named Todd Bolsinger, Canoeing the Mountains, about just like ministry dynamics. It's a little bit more geared towards the church. I'm reading a book by one of my colleagues in RUF who's in Washington, D.C. at Howard University. And I cannot come up with a name, but his name is Cyril Chavis, and he's awesome. And he's writing particularly to a Black HBCU context, and trying to help them understand the Bible. And that book rocks. It's so good. I would highly recommend it. And then I have the goal of going through Calvin's Institutes this summer. And so I've gotten to the second chapter. But that's
dude, you're behind, man.
Oh, I'm way behind. Yeah.
Is this your 12th time through the Institutes?
I'm not going to answer that, just in case someone that cares about me is listening.
Oh, dang. So you're saying you've gone through it more. Okay. All right, Kyle, you're on blast.
All right. I've already read through the Institutes this summer.
Did it, Kyle? My really. God. He's just been spitting out the Institutes while we've been in this call.
That's a lie. I've never read them at all. So recently, I kind of like to alternate between books that are academically focused, personally focused, and then specific to my ministry focused. So I guess this is kind of a combination of two. But the last one I read, it's called Beholding by Strawn Coleman. And Strawn is actually a musical artist, so that was my first introduction to him. And he does like he is like a quote unquote Christian artist, whatever you want to take that as. But his book is called Beholding, and it's just really about drawing in deeper presence with God, and being mindful of, or being prayerful. Yeah, that's what I got.
Awesome.
Gotcha. All right. So this is not a trick question, I promise you. But if you could recommend one podcast right now, what would it be?
I mean, my own. Can I do that?
Yeah, go ahead and do that, man.
Okay, cool. I have a podcast. Probably shouted out last time. It's called Not a Christian Podcast. It's not a Christian podcast. It's a podcast that happens to be Christian. So whenever... It's a lot less serious than this one most of the time, but I do also talk about theological stuff on it. In fact, tomorrow I'm going to record this week's episode, and it's funny, we talked about like AI and Chat GPT. What I did was that I entered in just like a 1 or 2 sentence summary of some segments I've done in the past, and I let Chat GPT like create a script out of it. So I'm going to see what it would look like if my podcast had a script written by AI, and I'm going to read those on the podcast. So that's going to be fun. So pretty irreverent, but pretty fun.
Actually, sounds so cool.
Yeah. So I'm looking forward to that. I've already like gotten all the like transcripts, and like they're pretty funny, like in just how, like you can tell this wasn't written by a person. It's hilarious, but anyway, that's my podcast recommendation.
There you go, man.
I've got 2. Sorry, John. I have 2 podcast recommendations. One is...
I feel like if Kyle's recommendation was his own podcast, that kind of gives you...
Yeah, that's right. That's right. So one of them, I feel like I can give 2 because this one is a very short podcast, but it's by... a pastor who's probably in his like early 60s, maybe mid 60s, who just wants to encourage people in ministry. It's called Great Heart's Table, and it's only like 7 or 8 minutes, and it's published like once a week. And he's awesome. It's by a guy named Randy Greenwald. He's just been a faithful pastor for over 30 years. I would highly recommend that one. And then like my resource podcast is the Mockingcast, which is interestingly put on by like some Episcopalian priests. But there's a guy named David Zoll who has written 2 books that I've like really enjoyed. One's called Seculosity, and the other is Low Anthropology. And that podcast, I love the tagline. It's about the presence and absence of grace in our society, and they just like go through like articles or things that happen in the world and just kind of like bat around grace talk, and it's really great. So yeah, so
that's interesting.
Check it out if you want to.
And you said the Episcopalian, is that what you said?
They are Episcopalian. They are like faithful Episcopalians, which there are still some out there. Mm-hmm.
It is not every day that I get something like that recommended, so I'm actually kind of curious about that.
Yeah.
Dude, I was thinking a couple
Can't wait to hear what the Lutherans say about that.
That's funny.
Just kidding.
I just realized, dude, Kyle, I should have given you a segment, man, where you could talk about modesty, and I did not do that. I'm sorry, man.
It's okay. It's okay.
Did you end up doing that episode?
I did not.
Dang.
That was right around the time we were going to record this. But I was going out of town for 2 weeks, and I just had like so much that I had to do the week leading up, and then the 2 weeks I was all over the place, so I never did.
You still want to do that episode?
Maybe at some point.
All right, man. Final question. Y'all ready? Buffalo wings, bone in or bone out?
This isn't even. I'm honestly pretty ticked that you would even ask this question. Bone in. I mean, not even. No competition. Boneless wings don't even exist.
I don't care. So I guess I'm bone out.
You should care.
I do not care about this question at all. Sorry.
It goes back to what we were talking about earlier.
We've had such a friendly discussion, and then this happens.
You should be mad about this. It's the cultural currency. It's outrage. Like, what are we doing? Develop some conviction here.
Oh, man.
Drums or flats?
I like drums, man.
Really? Okay, I like flats. But we have to stay united against the boneless people, so we won't make this an issue.
I hate boneless wings and I hate ketchup.
What did ketchup do to you, John? I can't wait to hear.
It ruined food.
Okay.
Ketchup is what you use to hide the flavor of bad, crappy food. You don't put it on burgers. You don't put it on nothing. It's a corporate conspiracy to teach children to not enjoy proper food.
Yep. Yeah, I talked about this on my podcast once. McDonald's started putting ketchup on their burgers because kids were not ordering them. Like, kids didn't want to go to McDonald's until they started putting ketchup on the burgers. And then that's when they got the kids. So, it's a thing. It's a serious issue.
That's what's tearing this world apart, man.
What's that?
That's what's tearing this world apart.
Exactly.
Appreciate it, guys.
For sure.
Y'all got any final thoughts you want to throw out there?
Subscribe to City Square Podcast. It's a wonderful podcast.
Listen to every episode.
Every episode is a wonderful episode.
Like I do.
All right. Appreciate it, y'all. And
for sure.
Thanks everybody for joining us. If you enjoyed the conversation, like Lee said, subscribe to the channel, like the video, click the bell. And if there's any questions or comments that came up throughout the conversation, don't hesitate to drop them below. We'd love to hear your thoughts and interact and engage with you. And until next time, may the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord make his face shine upon you and be gracious to you. May the Lord lift up his countenance upon you and give you peace. Amen.